Hello, this is Hellbent, and welcome back to part 2 in the radio button for the AutoHotkey GUI tutorial series. Let me get caught up with what we did last. Using group variables. No, that's not it. Attaching a radio. Okay, submitting and updating the value. Let me see, I have some notes here. Show the two ways of going about doing this. One, external. Okay, so what we're going to do is we've assigned our radio button a variable. And what we want to do is we actually want to update the value to that variable, because right now, even if we click on the radio button, it's not actually going to do anything. Like that variable state or the value stored in that variable isn't going to change just by us clicking on it. So what we need to do is similar to like what we did with the edit field, is the submit command. And there's two ways that we can go about doing this. One is what I think is the preferred way of doing it, and then the other way is a batch kind of thing. And I'll show you the least preferred way of doing it first, and then after that I'll show you what I think is the better way of doing it, the simpler way of doing it. Okay, so we've already created our radio button. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a second one, just so that way we can switch between them. And I'm just going to call this, I'm going to use caps, var1. Okay. So I'm going to call the second the variable that I'm going to call this, label to this next one, I'm just going to call var1, just to keep it simple. And then I'm going to use that same, I don't need this part right yet, but I'm going to add it in because we're going to need it in a minute. But the first way we're going to do it is a little bit different. We're not going to actually be using the label that we have within this for this first thing. Okay, let me see. Okay, so like I said, we want to be able to store the value, the state of the button, the radio button, in that variable. So we want to store the 0 or the 1 in it. By default, when it's unchecked, it's 0. So if we were to check the value of that variable right now, is it 0? I think it's nothing. I think right now, if we were to check that, I think if we checked it right now, I think it has no value. Because we've initialized it, but we haven't actually stored a value to it. I'm not sure. Let me see. I think it's a 0. But let's check anyways. So let's do var1, because it's an easier one for me to type out. And let me move this over here. Damn mouse. Okay, so if I click on this, it'll tell me, yeah, so it has no value. Even though we were using it, it doesn't have any, it's just a garbage value, so when it prints it out, it has no value. In order for us to get that value, we need to do the submit. The first way we're going to look at is by using like a, what we're going to do is we're going to create a button. And I'm just going to go over this real quick. I'm going to call my label lab, and I'm not sure if that slash is going to give me a problem. Let me see. I might have to like do a literal. Yeah, okay, I thought so. I knew that was going to be a problem. Oh, okay. maybe that wasn't it. Okay, so what I need to do is actually create that label. So what did I call it? Lab. So this GUI submit I covered in tutorial number 3. So if you're not familiar with this, it means you didn't watch tutorial number 3, because I don't have the time to go into detail on things that I've already covered. Okay, so we have our button. It's attached to a label. When we press the button, it's going to execute the contents of the label, and it's just going to update the value of those variables. And then we're going to, let's get a message box so that we can actually print out. So we're just going to do our 2 variables. Oh, damn it. Why did I have to pick such long names? Some random. So that's our first variable, and our second one I just called var1 to keep it quicker. Okay, so let me see if I have everything right. So what we're going to do is when the user of your GUI, even when they click on the radio button, it's not going to actually do anything until they press a button or something like that, and only then is it actually going to update those values. So up until the point where they hit submit, it's not going to do anything. So here I have radio 1, and it's not doing anything. It's not updating those values. If I actually wanted to update those values, so here we have the first variable, or some random name, which is the first variable that we're going to be executing in our message box. So the first number that we see is going to be some random names value. Let me see. Okay. And I forgot to hit start on that. Oh well, I'm gonna, no matter what, I'm gonna finish through this in one video. Okay, so here we've said that we're going to store the value of 1 into the first variable, and now it should have a value of 0 in the second variable. I press our submit button, and there we go. So the first one is a 1, the second one is a 0. Okay, and if I add in and I'm just going to call this I don't need the label because I'm just radio 3, and I'll print out the value for this one as well. Oh, bar 2, is it, bar 2, okay. So now we have three variables, or 3 radio buttons, and we can check that whatever one is the one. Let me disable this, because that's going to get real old real quick. Like I said, I apologize for the whole mouse thing, and I ended up creating a... Okay, so I select one, I press, and so we can see that the first one has a value of 1, and then the other 2 have a value of 0. So we've updated the value in the variable. Before it was garbage. Now that we've submitted something, it's updated the values. If I switch it to the second one, it should be 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, and then it should be 0, 0, 1. Okay, so there we go. And we can do if conditionals, if statements, blah blah blah, and we can say if the value of variable 1 or var1 is equal to this or is not equal to this, do this. And likewise for all the other things. So we can have it, let's actually do something else. So we're going to have an if statement, because usually I don't go this deep into this stuff, but I know it's easier to understand this kind of stuff if there's more practical examples. So I'm going to say if the value of var1 is equal to 1, we're just going to have it do another message box, but okay, so only if the second radio button, when we hit our submit, only if our second radio button is the one that we've selected, or if it's, come on. Okay, so only if it's our second one, this one here, the radio 2, only if it's this one that's selected, will we get the second message box. So no matter what, we're going to get the first message box. But if we select it on this one, it's going to have that extra thing where the condition is met true, and we should get 2 message box. This one is the first one, and now we should get another message box, and it says it is 1. Okay, so this is the kind of thing that you do in your code after you've done your GUI. You have these kind of things. Obviously, it's not going to print out a message box saying it is 1. It'll do something else. It'll execute some other part of your program. It might close the program. It might open a window. It might do a click somewhere. It might do this. It might do that. Whatever you want it to be. I just use message box because it's the easiest tool to teach you with. Okay, so that's the first way we can do the submit. The second way is we can just have it submit every single time we press on the button. And I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of this. I should have saved that last message box. You know what? Because I don't want to type out these names, I'm just going to call this V1, V2. I'm a slow typer, and it's hard for me to do this stuff while I'm thinking. Like talk about stuff and type at the same time. So okay, so message box, we're just going to pop out those variables. So V1, okay. And like I said, like I said, this is the other way we're going to do it with, where every single time we press on the button, it's going to automatically go to a label. And we're going to create, normally, like if I do this in my scripts, usually I'll have a label for radios or check boxes or edits. So I know that every time I use one of them, I want them to submit whatever changes I've made. So I can use the same label for all of them. So if I have an edit field, I can use the same label for that as I use for the radio. And I'll usually name it something like submit all. So that'll be the name of the label. The literal name of the label will be submit all. So, and every single time that I want values to get updated, I'll include that particular label in all of my controls that it's necessary. And we do it the same way that we did with the button. So we just type in GUI submit and then no hide. Okay, so now it's going to update those values every time we press on the button. Okay, I got rid of that label. Okay, so like I said, every single time that we change the state of one of these things, it's going to automatically execute that label. And in our case, our label is attached to a message box, so it'll pop up a message box. And it tells us that our values are 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, and radio 3. Okay, radio 3 is not attached to it, but if it was, it would have... If it was executing our label, then it would be 001. But I didn't add in the label there. Okay, so that's the two ways that we can update or submit our values to change the values of the variables. So that way our program knows how to do different things. Next, what do we have? Using group variables. Okay, so here you saw in this last example, you saw how we let me type this out first, because I don't do too well when I try to talk and type. One of them ends up suffering, or both of them end up suffering. Okay, so in our last example, you've seen how if one of them was checked, all the other ones in that group would have been a 0 value. But there might be cases where it's easier for you to understand in an ascending order. So let's say I have 3 buttons right now, and what I'm going to do is, instead of having their states as either being 1 or 0, what I'm going to have is, if none of them are selected, I'm going to get a value of 0. If the first one is selected, I get a value of 1. If the second one is selected, I get a value of 2. And if the third one is selected, I get a value of 3. The way we do that is, in our group, we only declare our variable once, and we're going to use the same variable for all of them. So there we have this one here, our variable 1. And our variable 1, because they're in a group, all of them are going to be attached to that variable. So our state, whatever radio that we're currently using, is going to be the one that executes that. So let me... Now what I should do is I should have like another control in, so that way you can see the state, the 0 state, because when none of them are selected, it's going to have a 0 state. When this one's selected, it's a 1. This one is selected, it's a 2. This one's a 3. But that means that I have to take the time to add in that control, add a label, blah, blah, blah. So just take my word for it that if none of them are selected, if there was a way for me to submit that value, it would be a 0 if none of them are selected. So just assume that that's what's going to happen. So right now, if I triggered on a button or something like that that executed this submit command anywhere else, it would submit the value of 0. So, but because I don't want to add that other button in or whatever, you're not going to see it. But you will see that this is going to be a 1, this is going to be a 2, and this is going to be a 3. Right? And when you go through your programming, you can use, so if variable, if v1 equals 1, do this. If v1 equals 2, do this. If v1 equals 3, do this. So that's another way of doing it. I don't usually do it this way. Usually I go with the 1 and 0. Usually that does well enough for me, but this kind of thing can be useful for you if you want to do it that way. All right, so that's that. I think you're good with that. Using group, only one variable, blah blah blah. Okay, sometimes you're going to want to have something where the state in the beginning is already checked. So right now, every time I run this GUI, none of the buttons are checked. If I want one of them to be checked as a default, all I have to do is, in the options for whichever one I want it to be, somewhere in the options, I just type in checked. So now the second one, by default, every time I run it, is going to be checked, and then I can switch between them. And I can do that for whichever one I want. So I can have the third one with a default state of checked. Okay, so that's how you do that. Enable, disable radio buttons. Okay, this one we're going to use that GUI control command that I introduced in the last tutorial, near the end of the last tutorial. So what we're going to do is, there might be cases where by checking one radio, it locks other groups of radios, or it unlocks other groups of radios. If you follow along, so let's say I have 2 groups. So just imagine that I have 2 sets of 3. So I have this group here, and then somewhere down here I have another group. But for whatever reason, I don't want this group to be unlocked unless the second one is locked here. or the second one is selected. So if the person selects the second one here, then it'll unlock the ability to select these ones down here. And let me make sure how I did that in there. I think did I miss something? I feel like I missed something. Updating the value using group variables. Okay, I got it. Okay, so this there's a number of ways that you can do this. I'm just going to show one way. If you want to learn more about it, I'll eventually go over more of this kind of stuff as we start into actual like creating detailed GUIs down the road and incorporating much more of the commands later on. But for this one here, I'm just going to show you the simplest way of doing it. So here I have 3 radio buttons, and what I'm going to do is immediately after whichever one of these that I want to have disabled, I'm just going to type in GUI control, comma, and then the command that I want it to be. So in this case, I just want to disable, and then I have to create a variable. Okay, so I need more than one variable again. Okay, so now each of these radio buttons is assigned to its own variable, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable variable 2, or the radio 2, or the radio that's attached to the variable 2. So I just type v2 here, so I have GUI control, disable, and then v2. And if I run this now, you'll see that it's a little bit difficult to see, but I can't actually select that anymore. And what I'll do to make it a little bit easier, maybe a little bit easier for you to see, is I'll get rid of the color of my background. Okay, so now it might be a little bit easier for you to see that the second control has been grayed out and I can't actually select it. So that's how we can disable it. Now what we want to do is have it through some process within our program. It's going to be re-enabled. And in our case, we're just going to keep it simple. And the way we're going to re-enable it is just by pressing on any one of the other. All of them are going to the same label. So I'm going to use in that label, I'm going to have it re-enable that. And I'm going to say if var, no, if v1, it's v1, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to say if v1 equals 1 GUI control enable, and then which one is it going to be? It's v2. Okay, I think that's good. So I'm going to get rid of the message box because we don't need that right now. And then, alright, I'll explain this more in a second. Okay, so here we go. We have our 3 radio buttons. We can't use radio button 2 unless through our code, in our code, we've said if we hit radio button 1, it's then going to enable radio button 2. So if we go ahead and hit radio button 1, and there we go. Now we can use radio button 2. And like I said, we wouldn't use it in a group like this. It could be a group down here. It could be some other control. It could be a button. It could be a checkbox. It could be an edit field. So anything that we want to disable, enable, this is the kind of way that we do it. Let me make sure that that's entirely clear. I think that's clear. I'll do one more little example in this. Just so that way I'm confident that everyone's following along. Okay, so I got rid of the checked for the v3, and now what I'm going to do is another if statement. I'm going to say if v3 equals 1. GUI control disable v2. Yeah, okay. So here what I've done is if I select the first button or the first radio, it's going to enable the currently disabled second radio button, but then if I hit the third one, it's going to re-disable it. So this is just showing you that you don't only have to. So here I've enabled it, and now if I want to disable some control, it doesn't have to be this radio button. It could be any other control that's in my thing. This is how we do it, right? And now it's disabled. So by selecting this one, it disables it. Selecting this one, it enables it. Okay. Likewise, there's another thing that a couple other things we can do. I'll show you one more quick one. Let me do. So I'm going to hide. As soon as it runs the GUI, it's going to hide that. And then it's going to show it. And then it's going to hide it. Okay. So here we go. You can't even see that control. If I want to see that control, I hit that one and then boom, it pops up. If I want to hide it again, so let's say if I click on this one here, it means that this control, whatever this control was, right now it's a radio button, but it could be any kind of control. Let's say as soon as I hit this, it means that I'm done with this. I never need this again. I can get rid of it, hide it away. I click on that and boom, it's gone. Out of sight, out of mind. That way it can't get triggered. Okay. Okay, I think that covers the radio button. On the next one, we're going to look at the checkbox, and because I covered most of the stuff that we're going to be doing for the checkbox in this one, it should be a lot quicker of a tutorial. If you like these tutorials, if you want to see more, be sure to hit the like button. Also, if you have any feedback, I know that sometimes I get a little bit mixed up and off track. If you have any suggestions on if you prefer things like, I don't have to do it this way. I could do tutorials. I think this is the best way of doing tutorials, is like you see me build everything from scratch, but it does take more time. If you think it's actually better if I have just samples maybe commented out, but they're already built, and I just go through it and say, okay, look, this is the word GUI, and I'm including it because of this. Like, if you'd rather it be already pre-written before I do the tutorial, leave me a comment down below, and I'll consider it. I probably won't do it, but if enough people like it, prefer that kind of thing, where it's already built, I just talk about what the program's doing, then I might consider doing more tutorials like that. I personally think that building from the ground up is the easier way of learning stuff, but it does take extra time. So I don't know. Let me know what you like, and maybe I can accommodate you. Anyways, have a good day, and I will see you on the next one. Let me go and stop my recording. Peace out.